I grew up with G.I. Joe.
I would go over to my friend's house and they would have all the figures and play sets.
Had a subscription to the comic books, watched every cartoon. So to me, G.I. Joe was part of growing up.
We started out with the comic books, then you moved on to the toys, then they had the TV show.
I had all the toys. I had everything. I joined the Marine Corps because of it.
I remember as a kid growing up and watching the cartoon. That was really cool.
Great childhood memories, to be honest with you. I grew up watching the show and playing with the action figures.
Different pieces would be, you know, the land on the water, all the different battles going on. So just good, you know, action memories growing up.
Lots of G.I. Joes in the backyard, you know, digging holes and playing war and shooting them and losing them. I always sort of liked, you know, create different stories for them and stuff.
Best action figures that you could have growing up.
Yeah, I loved it.
I played a lot with the 3 3/4 inch G.I. Joe figures. I had a couple of figures, but my friends had the big USS flag and had a lot of the other big vehicles. So we would always take our figures there and you know, play out our fantasy, what we saw on TV, and kind of make up our own. A friend of ours had his great woods in the backyard, and we would go out there and build these ramps and dirt mounds, and you know, that became our pit. And you know, the USS flag would be on the dirt, never actually in water. So you know, we really played out these fantasies.
Cobra's attacking our winter outpost. Call them the members of the G.I. Joe team.
Before I started working on the G.I. Joe brand, I honestly didn't know a lot about the brand's history. I remember the show from the 1980s. It was, you know, in the same time slot as the other after-school cartoons that I used to watch, but you know, I didn't really get into it. It was something that my older brothers watched. Growing up and getting the chance to work on G.I. Joe has been just an amazing process of discovery for me, because I didn't realize before just how much drama there has been in the series among the characters and the kind of missions that they've been able to fight on, their arsenal of gear and weaponry, and these fantastic, extraordinary, colorful characters that they get to go to combat against just make for fantastic storytelling.
Why does G.I. Joe continue to exist and defy me?
Because our beloved Cobra Commander
could never defeat America's ultimate defense, G.I. Joe.
I think in the G.I. Joe versus Cobra fantasy, you could pick those iconic looks. So if I was into monsters or creatures, I could really be into Crocmaster or Zartan or some of the other guys. And if I was really into clean, more military look, I could be into Duke and Stalker and those guys.
But what we tried to do with the characters, from Larry in terms of the comic, through the television and all that, was to create people, to create personalities and individuals and characters who you could stay with, who you could live with, who you would still identify with when you were no longer 8 and 10 and 12. And those fans remain, and they remain for a lot of the relationships that they admired or appreciated or shared, or just the nostalgia of it when they were kids.
There's the Snake Eyes, the Ninja, and Hawk, Duke, Scarlet, Lady J, yeah.
I remember Cobra Commander. I remember the mobile command center that the G.I. Joes had, because I had it.
My favorite character is Snake Eyes, just because it was so important to have a character that couldn't use verbal skills to be able to get across what he wanted, and it gave this nice mysterious act to it. So then when Snake Eyes came out, then a couple of years later when we brought out Storm Shadow, it was great to have both of those ninjas and some of those iconic battles that they had in the animation, the comics, and then kids could portray that in their toy line at home.
Sergeant Slaughter in the movie was really cool.
Sergeant Slaughter, he was absolutely my favorite G.I. Joe, bar none.
One of the characters I really loved was Sergeant Slaughter, and bringing that mania of wrestling, which was a Hasbro group idea, because they had the wrestling figures and action figures, but having actually the real live Sergeant Slaughter come into the show, come on to play this heroic role.
Sergeant Slaughter!
Mission accomplished! Let's go home!
I was into unique looking guys that had some kind of malady, so a dude in a big metal head was great, and Zartan changed colors and changed his look, and lived in a swamp, which I just thought was pretty cool. So those were probably my two favorite. I identified with Cobra characters more often than Joe.
Commander, your hood, put it on.
It takes a strong stomach to watch me eat, doesn't it, Destro?
I think because of the time that it came out, that the early 80s weren't the greatest time in the world, and the Cobra guys just seemed to fit with what was going on, and a lot of people identify with that menace.
Soviet Union was still around then, so I guess everybody's related to the military and Cold War type stuff. It was just, I don't know, for a boy, a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, it was pretty much perfect.
It was a way for kids to overcome those fears, and they could take the G.I. Joes and fight against Cobra and feel like they're in control of their world at a time when the economy wasn't great and things with our government were shaky with other governments. And I think G.I. Joe played that out for kids in some sort of therapy. And it stuck with us. Those of us who still are fans of G.I. Joe and have grown up and been part of the entertainment industry particularly. You have people like Seth Green, who does G.I. Joe references all the time on his show, and Seth MacFarlane on his show. And G.I. Joe is still in the popular culture with people of my age group that grew up in the 80s.
Seth MacFarlane of Family Guy called my agent a couple of years ago and said, is the guy who did Flint on G.I. Joe still alive? And my agent said, well, yes, and we represent him. And so I got to be on the show. I was thrilled. And I had no idea. I mean, here's a man in his 30s, and I had no idea that he was such a fan and that this was one of the things that inspired him to his fabulous career with Family Guy. And I was so complimented. It was fun. I got to stand in the stall of a toilet and come out and bust a kid for drinking alcohol.
So I thought there was some good values. And I always see those G.I. Joe commercials that are like, knowing is half the battle. I think that was really cool for kids.
The next time you get angry over a bad play, remember you need teamwork to win, not arguments.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
One of the most memorable things about G.I. Joe when you talk to people from the 80s is the PSAs.
Knowing is half the battle. And knowing is half the battle.
Knowing is half the battle. Go Joe!
The PSAs were great. I think not unlike certain movies that had like little things at the ends of them from that era, the PSAs for G.I. Joe were a reason to stay through the ends of the credits. And the fact that you have this secret organization of these tough military guys who are known by every kid on every street corner.
Quick Kid, Footloose, Blowtorch, Scarlet. What?
The fantasy was broken, but it makes for a very memorable part of the show, even now.
Instead of fighting when you disagree, look for a better way.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Oh, that was really fun, the fact that there's an entire generation of people who remember this stuff.
One of the great things about the job is being able to go to a lot of the conventions like JoeCon and Comic-Con and talk to the fans.
JoeCon is a convention that takes place every year in the United States. It brings fans from around the world together to celebrate the history of G.I. Joe.
It's an amazing sight of men and some women that really have embraced G.I. Joe as a lifestyle.
A lot of fans across the country and across the world look at this as their family vacation of the year. So they save up their money so that they have as much money to spend. You have a lot of different dealers there that can buy hard-to-find figures from the 1980s as well as current product, you know, the latest in T-shirts. And it's just a gathering of fans for them to be able to share what they love about the brand with each other.
There's anything from 12-inch collectors to 3 3/4-inch collectors. People dress up. It's a real celebration of what G.I. Joe is about.
Fans come from across the world. Some of them, you know, spend 12 hours driving to come to the conventions just to talk to us about what the new toys are or what the new animation plans are about the movie. And so it's great to be able to get that one-to-one relationship with the fans because we want them to know that we're listening to them, and we also want to take their feedback. It's them that have really kept this brand going for years that we want to make sure that we are putting what they want into the property for the kids of the future as well as for them.
You know, we usually set up an area where fans can come and see what Hasbro's doing with new action figures, and a lot of our fans will come up to us and, you know, tell us, hey, I've liked this figure. I think you guys should do this with this figure. How about bringing back this figure? And we do a lot of research there. You know, we definitely get a lot of insight from from the fans.
It's an opportunity for us to engage with our fans and hear what they have to say about how we're doing with marketing the brand and creating new storylines and a new vision for G.I. Joe.
I've been really kind of pleasantly surprised by how many other female fans there are of G.I. Joe. When you go to JoeCon, for example, you see plenty of females there. They don't make up the bulk of the attendees, but you definitely see female fans coming to JoeCon. And sometimes you even see them dressed up. The last JoeCon, there was a costume contest where you even had little girls dressed up as Scarlet. We had a little girl dressed up as Scarlet, and she actually won the G.I. Joe costume contest. So as many male fans as there are of this franchise, there are definitely some very avid female fans as well. I'm one of them.
It's really the G.I. Joe fans that have kept this brand alive for so many years, and we have fans from multiple generations on G.I. Joe. You know, the brand existed back in the 60s, and that really gives us a generation, multiple generations of fans who we really pay close attention to and value.
You know, without our fans, we wouldn't have celebrated 25 years, and we wouldn't have had a movie, and you know, without our fans, we won't have a future. When I got to work on the line back in 2000, 2001, I think one of my favorite figures was probably the action figure that I did of myself, which was, you know, kind of cool to do. It was always, you know, a dream. It's, you know, you played with the action figures, and then to actually become an action figure, you know, Agent Faces was the figure.
The story of G.I. Joe is the ultimate fantasy of good versus evil.
Well, to paraphrase the great late Wally Wood, there's the good guys and the bad guys, and the job of the good guys is to kick the butts of the bad guys.
And so the Joe team is the great liberator of all things good from all things evil, all across the face of the globe. What's wrong with that?
With the launch of the comic book, it had a real impact on boys all across the country, and they were surprised and delighted when the toy came. And this was, you know, the first year of Joe, so G.I. Joe became this revitalized new character in a new form. And really early in the fall of that year, we recognized that we had uncorked the phenomenon that had existed in the Joe franchise from the beginning, but now we'd recaptured it again. And so we went to Hasbro and we discussed with them and proposed to them that we do something that had never been done again, which was to do a mini-series in animation for the G.I. Joe character and for the G.I. Joe team.
What Joe and Tom had figured out was we can have an action squad. We're not going to make it an army show. You know, Vietnam was still hovering around. Granted, it was the Reagan administration, but they wanted to have G.I. Joe be a counter-terrorist force, and Cobra was this sort of motley terrorist group.
G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained special mission force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
So we went out to California and we started talking to writers, and we were particularly impressed with Ron Friedman.
Hasbro, Griffin McCall, were looking for a writer who didn't write animation. They wanted someone who was writing for real television, live television, and they interviewed a lot of people, and I evidently got their interest, and they gave me the job.
He had a sense of design. He really understood the whole idea that what we wanted, because basically his experience was doing live action, television, action adventure. So he had a lot of experience in that way, and he loved the idea that we wanted to treat it like a live action miniseries. So because one of the things we wanted to do was to capture the exotic locations and set things in different parts of the world to give it that real excitement, because we're going to run it over 5 days, and so that would enable you to feature different members of the G.I. Joe team and different adversaries.
I said, I've got to make them characters. They have got to resonate. The design of the characters is great. How are you going to marry the interests of those kids that have to fall in love with the characters, as I did with Superman and Batman and Green Lantern? How do you grab them if you don't create characters?
We'll never forget you. For what you've done, Snake Eyes. We owe you our lives.
And what's great about these characters is that they're not superhuman. They're not running around in capes. They're not endowed with alien powers. So every kid can think, gosh, I could grow up and train really, really hard and work really, really hard so that I can be a member of G.I. Joe.
Each of the characters got to have a really, great, unique personality. I think Larry Hama did a lot of those ahead of time.
All the characters sort of fulfill these little niches that comprise this little group. That's the core of the fantasy about wanting to belong and have these friends and buddies.
There were big families of bad guys and big families of good guys. So how do you work with huge numbers? What I created was a kind of little triads or pairs who would go off together. And thereby we got to know who these characters were because they played off one another.
He did an outline first of what he had in mind, and we really liked it. Showed that to Hasbro, and then at that point we went to script, and then we started, casting, and we started nailing down the kind of voices that we wanted.
No sign of Cobra. How does it look from ground level, Scarlet?
Clear here, Duke, but I don't believe it'll stay that way.
Me neither. What's the situation on your side, Flint?
So far, so good, but things could still get hairy between here and headquarters.
The audition process for G.I. Joe was really interesting. It was classic, almost old Hollywood. Wally Burr, who is still around, and as he will tell you, was the youngest tank commander in all of World War II, Captain Wally Burr, became a cartoon director. And he got the series G.I. Joe. And he was a terrific director. He directed for a lot of psychological detail that really hadn't been done so much in TV cartoons before. And he had us lined up around the block outside his studio in North Hollywood. And the script girls were there and the producers were there, and they passed out scripts, and there were literally 50 of us standing on the street.
The casting process is letting, first getting sketches, finding out what the hell is going on.
They had for us simple preliminary drawings from the artists.
And the guy says, this guy looks thin-faced or fat-faced or whatever. And a picture is essential to giving the actor something to kick off on. So he gets into that.
And ultimately, you get in the booth, and you're behind glass, and they go, okay, go. And you're looking at about 12 people standing around, because there weren't enough chairs, and a big mixing board and a console, like a rock and roll studio, and you do your thing, and then Wally Burr or one of the writers or somebody from Sunbow said, a little deeper, a little faster, a little smarter, a little tougher.
I always like to start out by saying, whatever you see or feel in terms of what you see in the text and what you see in the picture, give it to me, see what. And I say, okay, got another one for a second character? And I'll say, now try, and I'll give him what I would like to do.
Okay, now you're in a fight. You know, that kind of thing. And if you hadn't done that in your shower before, you'd have to dig deep.
Then I'd probably give him 8, 10 people on any given character and say, I'm happy with these, would you like to make your selection? And I'd get the word back in a few days, and then we'd make a deal with the, arrange with the agent to say, we have now selected so-and-so, so we'll be on the lookout, we'll be recording soon.
And then we started, and we did session after session after session after session, and it was probably the greatest experience I've ever had in this business. Being with all these fabulous voices, and they started bringing sort of demi-celebs in, and you know, these old character actors from TV that I'd known years ago as a kid with these great voices, and suddenly there they were chomping virtual cigars and, you know, playing characters with weird names.
Nothing stops them, Roadblock. If we quit, they win.
Then we better not poop out. Let go of my legs, sucker.
We did 3 years of launching in the fall a miniseries. But before the third one was done, we had already started work on the series because it takes a long time to pull that all together. We opened up an LA office. We got a great team of writers led by Steve Gerber, who was like a legend in the comic book field, and Flint Dilley, who became our story editor. I think he edited 55 G.I. Joe series episodes, and Buzz Dixon, and just a really great team of people.
We had really good writers. I remember Christy Marks gave me a script. This is kind of like my job test. Christy Marks gave me the script. And I read it and I said, guys, I like being paid and everything, but there's really nothing I'd change. I mean, this is, the script's just true to its own vision of the thing. It's just all there. And they said, well, we thought the same thing. I was like, oh, I guess that was the right answer.
We can't get inside. Now we can.
G.I. Joe was interesting. It was just a show for me that from the first time I saw it to when I left it, I had exactly one vision for the show. I did a lot of weird stuff in there, but I just knew what that show was, and it was very natural and it was very easy, and I don't remember any disagreements between anybody about what the show should be.
The stories were imaginative. They were imaginative. I think that everybody was encouraged to just blow it out. It's not like, don't do the same story the next time that you did that time. Just make it really clever and really blow it out,
The world's gone nuts! They're driving me buggy! They're all over me! Hang on, boys! The exterminator man's here! Whoops! Let's pack it in, fellers! We ain't got a big enough tail to swallow them horseflies!
I don't remember any really lame Joe scripts. I mean, by the time they came in from the writers, you would want to polish them up. I mean, the story editor's job was to make the show consistent with all the other episodes. And 90% of the time, that just meant, changing dialogue, changing relationships between characters. So, you'd always do some structural work, or you'd have some idea that you wanted to put in there, or you'd always buff it up. But it was an amazingly talented collection of people writing them.
Somebody did a two-part series. I think it was Marty Pasco wrote a two-part series about two different worlds, like that there was Joe's in an alternate reality. And in that alternate reality, World Without End, I think it was called, some Joes have been killed, right? And our Joes, 7 of our Joes land on this alternate reality planet, and they have to deal with this. And it was really a wonderfully imaginative, fresh idea.
Clutch to Lady J! I found what I was looking for!
The Lincoln Memorial's become a Cobra Commander Memorial?
Yeah, and it looks like the United Nations have become one nation. Under Cobra!
Cobra has conquered the world!
A lot of people used to say, oh, it's just another half-hour toy commercial. They were a lot better, structure-wise and story-wise, than some of the other stuff on television at the time.
I'm telling you, Lady J, being a G.I. Joe is ruining my life. I don't have time for nothing else. Why do you think I ain't got a girlfriend no more? She got sick of worrying about me all the time. That's why.
Oh, put a sock in it already, will you, Steeler?
Yeah, motion seconded. We've all had to make sacrifices to...
Yeah, I know, but I still say this one's a wild goose chase. Hey, Bogey's coming up fast.
They would give you a springboard, and the springboard would be Cobra is trying to, create earthquakes in California. Okay, and do 3 story takes on that. And then they tell you the characters they wanted to use. Yeah, and that didn't mean you couldn't use other ones, but they wanted a featured thing for Gung Ho, and they wanted some for Flint, and they want the Baroness in there. And usually 3 Cobras and 3 Joes. Then what you do is you'd give 3 takes on this California earthquake idea. And what we found, the first one would be pretty much the one everybody expected. The second one would be a little bit different, and the third one was just somebody throwing out a ridiculous idea.
Yes? This is the Viper. I come on Friday. West corner.
What was interesting about episodes like The Viper is Coming is that there's no other show in the known universe where you could get away with that episode.
Mr. Barbecue. I'm Barbecue. I'm the Viper. I've come to wipe your windows. $5.75 an hour. I start on west corner. Top floor first.
If you were doing shows for a Saturday morning network animated show, everything was so overthought and so precious that you just wouldn't have gotten away with that idea. When you're doing, episode 39 of G.I. Joe, and there are 56 episodes that season, after a while it's just, that sounds kind of cool, let's go with it. And stuff could slip through that would be just wonderful. And because it was relatively low stakes, you could just say, okay, we're doing that one. But what you knew is by the time it got through the process, no matter how weird the idea was, it would end up being a G.I. Joe episode. And there were times when we decided, let's make them just really weird, and we can always pull it back. And we just got sick of episodes where it's like, okay, and then we blow up the headquarters in the final scene, and Cobra's created the. We did have one great thing. We had the Voltronic Galaxiter, and the Voltronic Galaxiter actually came out of Transformers. We used it in G.I. Joe too. It was our name. It was like MacGuffin. It was our name for whatever the stupid machine that either Cobra or the Decepticons were coming up that week that we had to stop. And I think I even tried to slide a Voltronic Galaxiter into an episode somewhere.
Here are the components you requested, Doctor. My troops are ready to assist you in building the Vulcan machine.
And what's this Vulcan machine supposed to do?
If any country is foolish enough to resist Cobra, the Vulcan machine will unleash a torrent of boiling lava from the Earth's core, reducing its largest city to charred ruins.
The series had this imagination vista to it where you could go anywhere, and you could go underwater, and you could go to exotic places, and because we were in animation, we could be anywhere, and we could create these wonderful environments. So it was taking the fantasy that children have in terms of their own understanding of adventures and carrying it forward with real people, with people like themselves.
Remember, the loser makes dinner. I win.
What did you do that for, Lady J? He'll make us eat that homemade Cajun gumbo of his.
Yeah, last time we used it to fuel the Sky Strikers.
Gumbo builds muscles, right, Doc?
Well, it's certainly given you a cast iron stomach.
But each of the characters got to have a personality, and it wasn't just, military.
Oh, man, will you look at it?
And what? All I see is snow.
Oh, don't you have eyes? Look at those tall pines, those rugged peaks.
Makes me homesick.
Where you from, Bazooka?
South Florida.
If you were to ask 10 different people, you'd probably get 9 different answers as who's their favorite, based on the job they had or the weapons that the toys came with or how they were portrayed in the comic or in the animation. And there's a wider range of popular characters, even if they were fringe characters, which is really interesting.
Ace? You okay?
Except for the lethal wound to my pride. That bozo almost cashed in our chips.
Forget it. You did good up there. We're alive, aren't we?
Obviously, as a character, dimensional character, I thought Duke was a great hero.
Duke is your quintessential G.I. Joe. He is the guy who is always going to be the first to volunteer for an important mission.
Ace, get one of those rattlers. Radio the Joes and tell them what we found. What about you? I'm gonna shut down this little operation.
He really embodies what being a member of G.I. Joe is all about. It's about being a good teammate, being a leader by example, and just always being there for the fight and never asking your teammates to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. That's Duke.
Sure hope my timing's as good as I think it is. Yo, Joe!
And he really took hold of the G.I. Joe team, and he was a really good leader.
The company belongs to the first sergeant. The commanding officer borrows it from him. He's the guy that really knows what's going down, and he's got the experience and the legs on the ground.
And yet he did have a sense of humor, not as wild a sense of humor, of course, as Cobra Commander, but he did have a certain sense of humor.
You're not just gonna let him nap there, are you, Duke?
I have a policy about 10-foot bears.
Lady, as far as I'm concerned, they can sleep anywhere they want.
Priority Mayday breaker. Scramble the Joes.
Roger, Flint. I smell a rat.
Yeah? Well, I smell a snake. This little disappearing act reeks of cobra.
Flint was a very no-nonsense guy with great big guns and biceps and a black beret and camouflage T-shirt who had very little humor. There were a couple of humorous scenes involving suntan lotion and my girlfriend in the series, Lady J, a very straight-ahead guy, tough, no-nonsense leader. And when I got the job, I thought, boy, this is really casting against type.
Now, if I was in charge... But you aren't Beachhead. First comes Hawk, then Duke, then me, and finally you.
There's an interesting, if you watch Flint's career closely, you'll notice episodes that I story-edited. Flint, was field marshal and, was ordering Duke around, and he, episodes I didn't, especially when, Vindictive, Doug Booth would get in there or something. Flint would be like peeling potatoes and all. His very interesting career to watch.
Snake Eyes, wait!
Snake Eyes!
Snake Eyes is, the mystery commando. He's the guy that anybody could fantasize about being because you don't know what he looks like. Doesn't say anything. He just does his job, and he's the best at what he does.
Citizens of the world, on behalf of the great Cobra Empire, I address you now.
Cobra Commander, who's the leader of the Cobra team, always has these diabolical plans of taking over the world or blackening the world out by these satellites and other things and transport devices and all kinds of crazy stuff.
You have no hope of resisting our might. We control a new power, the raw strength of nature itself, against which there is no defense. Watch as I unleash the sea and sky to do my bidding!
Cobra Commander was full of ideas, new ideas for the craziest, zaniest things that could possibly do to capture the Joes, to destroy the world except for his world, to put his face everywhere.
Well, Cobra Commander is sort of he's a damaged guy who, at the core of what he is he's very insecure, so he needs for everything to be under control.
I told you there were holes in this plan to begin with.
Foiled by a cattle stampede! A cattle stampede! I can't believe it! But I'll be back!
Destro's a little different.
You display considerable cleverness, more than I have come to expect. But Destro does not celebrate until his wars are won.
His main conflict is that he sees himself as an honorable person. That's the whole core of his conflict.
The time has come to get to the bottom of this viper business. This little game will now come to an end.
And then there were the female characters who were really interesting. The Baroness.
We got G.I. Joe trapped like rats. Attack!
Obviously, I love the Baroness. Come on, every single woman who touches the G.I. Joe brand in some way just loves the Baroness. Men love the Baroness, women love the Baroness. Come on, what's not to love about the Baroness?
As a character developing her, she was probably the most complex, figuring out who she was. And also controversial because the lead villain being a woman was something that had not been done often before.
Just like boys love to play G.I. Joe because sometimes it's fun to play good and sometimes it's fun to play bad. With girls, you could play good or you could play bad. Scarlet is this wonderful female character who is all about doing good. And the Baroness is this charming, sexy, evil female character. And, for girls, sometimes it's fun to be bad, too.
All's fair in love and war.
And then there was some romance, Scarlet was, became Duke's girlfriend.
Well, may as well get back to base, huh?
May as well. Or you could take me to dinner and a movie now that everything's working again.
Now you're cooking with gas.
But she's also the very competent big sister who was on equal footing with the rest of the guys, and people respect her for that.
You can run, Cobra, but you can't hide.
Probably one of my favorite characters is Lady J. Not only is she a very strong female character in the G.I. Joe lore, but she's college educated, she knows who she is, she has romantic interests, and she doesn't let those romantic interests compromise the mission at hand.
Well, fella, this is where I get off.
Was there something I said?
The thing that I find most compelling about these stories is the relationships that these characters have with each other.
Ripcord. Never thought your ugly puss could look so good.
Kind of romantic out here, ain't it? Give me a break.
With pleasure.
Is everyone okay?
We all made it, Duke.
And it's back to square one for Cobra.
These are the characters that have engaged G.I. Joe fans starting in the early 1980s and continue to engage fans today.
There were hijinks in the recording studio, such as one actor would be emoting and serious and bent over and gesticulating, and someone would come up behind him and sort of push the back of his knees, and of course he'd fall over.
Yeah, everybody lightens up, and there's a lot of fun in the studio.
Wally Burr, our magnificent director, in order to satisfy the darker side of himself, in a moment of great seriousness, would say, do it, all right, do it, it's got to be faster. It's got to be faster, I told you that. Listen, this is a serious, you're really in danger. This is a dangerous scene. You got to sound threatened. All right, now do it like a mosquito with a hat on. Okay, now do it like Doris Day would do it.
Is this tough enough?
These are great actors. These are great actors. And we provided, shut up, we provided the dramaturgy in these characters. These characters were bare bones, skeletons. And we, all of them, on the good and the evil. We provided that, and that was what was most fun about it, besides the hijinks and doing it. That was the most fun.
G.I. Joe!
My name is Arthur Burkhart, and I was Destro and Stalker. Destro for Cobra Command, and Stalker among the Joes, and assorted other voices too.
Neil Ross, the primary character in G.I. Joe, was Shipwreck. But I was also Buzzer, Monkey Wrench, Dusty, Thunder. I think that's it.
And you name your kids after... Never mind.
And I'm Greg Berger, and I did Spirit in G.I. Joe, had an ongoing battle with Storm Shadow. I also did Firefly and Cutter and Ripcord.
I'm Jack Angel. The only character I did in G.I. Joe was Wetsuit. And Wetsuit talked like this, you know. I loved doing him, slogging through the mud and everything. It was good.
I'm B.J. Warden. I used to wear a wetsuit to the sessions, but I played Scarlet.
We all remember
and
that.
Yes. Oh, here we go.
We're off. We're off.
We're off. Now this is exactly what would happen at the sessions. Being the only female in the session, and I was not prepared for a lot of the
Don't count on it.
language and the things that I heard. But now, of course, I am. But I played Scarlet, and then I played assorted, frightened villagers and Vietnamese children and old people and whatever, because they could get you for 3 voices. So if they needed you to be the scared person running in the distance, you do that, or the 85-year-old man from another planet that had landed in the jungle, you say, well, everybody's got 3 voices. BJ? And Michael would go, do this, go like, so that was me.
Michael Bell, Duke, Major Blood, and was I Tomax or Zaymot?
You were Zaymot, and
you
I
were,
was Tomax.
I was Zaymot, and you were Tomax.
That sounds like a medication now, doesn't it?
Toenails? and toenails. And I was Lift Ticket. And
I was
Xanax. You took Xanax, as I recall.
Yeah, all those drugs they have now sound like characters that we used
From
to
G.I.
play.
Joe, they too.
I am Paxil. How dare you?
Anything with an X or a Z in it seems to be.
X-lax. No.
What do you
I'm
think?
high on
Saipan?
Serpentor.
All right, I'm Dick Gautier, and I played Serpentor, and I guess a few other guys, I don't remember, but they all sounded alike. You know,
That's what we liked about you, consistency.
Yeah, I was always saying, I played this guy, then I played a guy like this, then I did this guy. You know, you ever see the difference? It's subtle. It's subtle. You have to have a good ear. But as Serpentor, I kept screaming, "This I command," you know, which I tried in my relationships, and you know, didn't work. So that's why I'm here.
And I was the other half of the team of Zaymot and Tomax. I was Tomax.
He would call me every day and say, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
Because if anything happened to me, he was out of the show.
Out of a gig.
Oh, Mr. Zaymot, oh, Mr. Quebec.
I can't go fight Cobra.
Wally Burr, our director, said, "Look, this cartoon walks like this. They're kind of stiff. They're not full action cartoons." He said, "In order to make them move, you have to do it with your voice, because when they're going like this through the mud, it's just a cartoon going like that through the mud. So you have to go, 'Let's go, come on,' dragging your foot through and you had to do it without body, with your voice." So all that stuff that was going on there was done by actors who had to do it without use of their bodies, and just create that whole sense of it with their voices.
I remember one time I was playing not Serpentor, but one of the GIs, and we were in a stream, and we were doing what Jack said. We were fighting our way upstream, and we were going, no. He said, no, you're fighting. This is a tough stream. Oh, God. Every step. Well, I never watched this show. But one afternoon, about 6 months later, I'm watching it, and I'm seeing the scene, and here are 3 guys walking like this and going, "Ugh, ugh." I swear to God. And I said, this direction is a little too much there, because here's these guys just kind of walking like this aimlessly. And he said, "Well, I told the animators in Korea or Taiwan or wherever it was to have him struggle against the water, and they didn't. So they did this." You know,
Wally used to call that. He used to call that body English.
Yes.
That was his little code for it. It was his code for a grunt, or because you're performing some physical action, and there was a lot of that. And I remember Peter Cullen one day saying to me, "You know, when I come out of a Wally Burr session, I open my car door, and I get my keys out, and I put the key in the ignition, and I start the car and drive home."
Yeah, I remember when there was.
Wally used to take me aside. I think that I shot one of these, or 3 of these, without you all. Wow.
What?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Without you.
Oh, come on.
And what happened was, I had other commitments or something, and what happened was, he would take me through the show, okay? Because he stopped doing that with me. He stopped, I don't know why. Maybe it's my size. But he stopped doing that, and he would allow me to be Destro, and he'd take me through the show, and then we'd go back and do all the onomatopoeia and the grunts and the movements and stuff like that. He would do that with me. And I was there, I think, for 7 hours.
7 hours, yeah, easy.
7 hours doing all that. I came out of that, one session I came out, at the end of it, he said, "I know you hate me." "Yes, I do, Wally, but I love you anyway." You know, and he said, "Have you ever seen one of the shows?" And I said, "That's the reason why I'm not screaming this time." And I used to scream and holler. And I think
we all left. We would leave a lung. We'd leave a lung on the window.
Right.
And you literally were in that room to a point where you were growing mushrooms on your chest. I mean, it was hot.
We discovered penicillin during that. We discovered penicillin actually on somebody that had been napping on the floor during one of those 10-hour sessions.
That was Roger C. Carmel.
Yes,
There was one person, there was one actor, I think he was dead, and we just thought it was his performance.
We just did, you
just
know.
lying there.
I thought that Wally Burr had a wonderful analogy, at least it worked for me, talking about your point about the cartoon. I sometimes say to people, if you don't think the voice actor makes much of a contribution, put on a cartoon, turn the sound off.
Yeah.
and you're just going to see little drawings sort of running around. Then put the sound back on, turn your back on the picture. You'll hear a full show. Great. You may not know what's going on because there's not exposition like in radio where they say, "Oh, I see you came through the door." But with the voice work and the sound effects and the music, there's a fully realized production, whereas that picture is not going to work without the soundtrack. Wally said something once. He said, the picture's like a beautiful car that they make in the factory, and it's shiny and red, and it's got the chrome, and it looks gorgeous. But there's no engine. It ain't going anywhere.
That's great.
Says, you guys are the engine.
Yes. He gets so carried away. He gets so excited. He just wanted it all to be right and wanted all. Everybody had to have that masculine center.
Or to
even
do
the
his
women.
reading.
Well, or to do his reading.
He gave readings, and if you read your line, and then he'd say, "No, it's more like this," and he'd do the reading, and you would do it, and he'd say, "No, listen, it's like this."
Because he
and
pre-heard.
And you do it again. Yeah. And he'd say, "You're not paying attention." And so he did it again, and the next time I just did exactly what I heard. And he said, "Well, now you're just doing an imitation of me." And you could hear everybody in the room, everything went, "Oh my God, it's the end of Jack." And then he said, "Well, I guess that's okay." And from that point on, I think every time somebody got in trouble, they just did an imitation of him, and he loved it.
Wally,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Wally probably was more committed to the work than almost any director I ever worked with.
And a great
director. He would arrive sort of bleary-eyed some mornings and confess that he had been up till 3 and 4 a.m. going over the script. And I mean, I worked with directors. I'm sure you'll recognize this guy who shall be nameless. Sometimes you need to know, your character goes eek. Well, did I just suffer a paper cut, or did I fall off a cliff? You need to know how big to make the eek. And you would ask this guy a question, and he'd glare at you, because he obviously hadn't looked at the script, didn't have a clue what was going on. He'd say, "I'll tell you what, why don't you tune in November, and we'll all find out."
Yes. You know? I had an advantage with Wally in that Wally was a tank commander in World War II, and I was an officer in the Korean conflict, World War 2.4.
Alta Casa.
Yeah. And I'd gone to Ranger School and all that other crazy stuff you do when
I
you're
was
young.
with the Oscar Wilde unit.
Yes, right. Well, Wally knew how tough it was to get into those positions, so there was an added little level of respect for the individual, not necessarily the actor.
And he was very loyal to his actors.
Yeah, he was.
He liked you.
Why are we talking about him like he's dead? I'm very nervous here. Is this a eulogy for Wally?
No, I did my first cartoon show with Wally, Jan of the Jungle, which Michael was on.
That's right.
And he was, so I felt very comfortable coming in because I had already known him from 1 or 2 other shows.
Super Friends.
Yeah. Super Friends, right.
Yeah. He said, if you're a superhero, you have to stand like this when you talk, because it opens the chest and your voice comes out bigger.
And he's probably right.
Yeah, we had to stand.
Absolutely
We had to stand
right.
there like that.
I teach like that. It's exactly what I teach. You get in
What
front
was
of
that body language?
You have to
slouch,
use
you
your
slouch
energy.
behind that mic. I'm going to hear you slouching. You stand on one leg. I'm going to hear you standing on one leg. Stand up, stand tall. And if you're playing the guy and you're playing the tough guy or the tough girl, I want to hear it. I want to see it. And if I don't see it, I'm not going to hear it.
You know what I remember him saying and telling us all, because we didn't want to do it? We're going to play the skeleton guys. You remember the skeletons? There was a whole crew of skeleton guys. And he said, pull your lips back and just talk through your teeth, because he said skeletons don't have lips. So we did everything dry, like that, and with our lips back, that made it sound like a skeleton.
Or the motion picture home about 4 in the morning.
That's right.
And the opposite of that is Gabby Hayes, who didn't have teeth.
Wally used to get on me about, Wally, he said he once had a communique from Joe and Hasbro about how Destro's voice was becoming unintelligible. So he said,
what did you say?
It's becoming
completely. You know, and I said, well, he's got these chemical burns and radiation and stuff like that, you know. And well, these guys, I have to tell you, I took this all the time. You see, I was about ready to say that Chris once told me before he died, oh God.
I hope it was before he died.
You know, better than after he died, yeah.
Well, after he died, I think we may have talked. Because he said, you know, Arthur, we owe, he said, I remember he said, Arthur, we owe an apology to Wally. And here's why. I finally agreed to see the show. I didn't see the show until '89. And he was right. I said, well, I explained. I said because there were chemical burns here, and there's radiation, and he's got half of his face is metallicized, and he's black. No, he's white. Wally said, no, he's white. I said, he's black. I'm making him black.
He's been burned.
He's been burned. Right, exactly. So I argued with Wally a little bit too much, and I was a prima donna. And yes, I was. Doggone it. I thought I was the star of the show, and yes, I did do that. And I finally saw the show, and I said, oh my God, we're bringing this thing to life.
I have a slightly different perspective on Wally, the show, and the experience because I was so inexperienced at the time I got that show. I had very minimum animation experience. I was thrilled to be on, lucky to be on. But when I looked through the glass and saw this guy that had enough energy to take us through 16 hours, much less 8, who knew everything backwards and forward, who had that storyboard out as though it were the Bible, and had such a sense of the big picture. When you walk into any animated session, you're handed basically paper, and you do your best to try to figure out what's behind that, behind all of the words. So as much as he seemed dictatorial, it was because he cared so passionately, so deeply, and so much about how his project came out. We were talking about this earlier, just about care and the difference between passion and the absence of it. And if there's a reason that something resonates and has longevity, like this show obviously has had, it's because some X factor of care gave it some heart that it wouldn't have otherwise had.
We just like to whine and complain, that's all.
Yo, Joe! Convoy, go! Yo, Joe!
Jack Angel welcomed me essentially into Los Angeles at a voice caster audition. You probably don't remember, but I'll never forget. But I was in, and I was nervous, and I was uncomfortable, and Jack said, don't worry, it's everybody's first day at some point. I'm Jack Angel. And
Did he hit on you at all?
He didn't hit on me. He stopped short of hitting on me.
I'll be darned. I don't remember that part.
I will never forget it.
I remember when you seemed to be scared.
Scared? I mean...
Weren't we all?
Chris and I took you kind of on the wing. Corey, too. Corey was,
Yeah, I remember Corey was a little shy.
He was a little shy.
Still am.
You're still shy.
Yeah.
But when you get behind the microphone, what is it like for you to be totally free to do these incredibly diverse voices?
I never had any desire to perform visually because I knew I had strength just sonically. Physically, I'd be so limited, I'd just be playing little nerdy guys. But with the voice, I discovered as a teenager, especially if I got in close to a really fine microphone, I can sound huge and intimidating. I end up playing a lot of villains these days, and always wanted to emulate the great announcers I grew up with. That's become a whole huge part of my career. The voice of Old Navy for 8 years, doing the old-fashioned announcers. Grander, bigger-than-life individuals. It's, I don't know how I could ever be anywhere near as effective on camera, even though people often...
You could today.
Oh, you could do,
today you can't, because the characters are not the superheroes.
Yeah,
now.
and
it's,
I guess
it's every guy today.
like Rod Serling, I actually photographed looking like a normal, tall person.
But I always had an argument with voice actors. We had tape boxes years ago, and some put their pictures on the box and others didn't. And a guy like Corey wouldn't put his picture on the box because it wasn't the picture of his voice. Right. And I thought that the argument was, from my days in radio, when I met people that heard me first and saw me later, they'd say, oh, I thought you were a great big guy, you know. And so I thought the tape creates you to people who don't even know you're there. So, and if you give them a picture, they'll listen to the tape, glue the voice to the picture, so that when they see you, you're right. If you don't do that, when they see you, and it's ultimately at some point they're going to see you, and you're going to be wrong.
Well, I grew up as a huge fan of radio and the great radio voices. I learned early on that when I walked into the radio station, it was going to ruin the face, the image that I had created for this radio personality forever. And to this day, it's like if I really love listening to somebody on the radio, I don't really want to know what they look like, because my picture of them is so much better than what any human being could live up to.
I wonder if fans feel that way when they, because we do conventions, obviously all of us have done conventions, and they go, you know, come on, Duke, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I mean, his puffy place is bigger than I am.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous. But those are the characters that they used to interview, and they say, well, I get to do all these characters that I couldn't do on camera.
Well, I especially, since I was a teenager, I've loved playing old crotchety characters.
And now you are an old crotchety character. Yeah, that's great.
I'll tell you. You got your wish.
Are you kidding?
You know, I don't come off as shy. I don't think, you know.
Really?
But you know what? I was very intimidated by it all, because I had come, you know, I did some stand-up and I did some Broadway.
Starred on Broadway.
But mostly kind of straight acting, you know. And in stand-up, I did some voices and stuff. But suddenly I was in the room with these guys, and I'm looking at these guys doing you and Frank Welker and all these guys doing 3 or 4 really brilliant voices, and I'm going, I'm out of my league here.
And yet, to me, you always had this tremendous comedic.
I was terribly intimidated. So when Wally said, "Come in and read for Serpentor," I said, what can I do except just unzip and bam, go for it as loud and as bad as I can and make him as evil as I can, so he's really repugnant as a character. And so I just jumped in with both feet and I swam, thank God, you know. But it was, I was intimidated in a different way than you were.
But it's acting talent. It's acting.
Yes.
You have a face in the business, and we know you were on Broadway, and we know you were on Get Smart, and we know all those things. When you're in the room, we go, oh, God, Gautier's here. Gee.
Oh, God, no, I never felt that at all.
Well, you never felt that from us? Or because you were too busy being shy about about this. It's a funny thing where he feels inferior, and then all the rest of the guys go, oh my God, it's him, you know. So
it all comes down to acting. I mean, that's what I learned. I was a vocal technician and a mimic before I studied with Doss Butler, and it wasn't until 4.5 years of workshop where suddenly I realized, oh, I can act. Where I learned to let the character play the character and not manipulate, not mechanically produce the
Andrea
voice.
Romano, who directs some stuff for another company, she is asked to give to come visit a class or listen to somebody, and she said, I don't care how good your voices are, can you act? Yes. And you've got to be able to act in the voice.
And Doss Butler, one of his favorite things to say was, forget what you sound like. Just play the character.
Yeah.
It will sound
And
perfect.
when those guys like Mel and Dawes passed away, they had to hire maybe 10 or 12 other guys to do the voices that came out of each of them. And you could hear the voice, but yet the scenes weren't being played.
And then they found Frank Welker.
Well, here's what levels the playing field is that when these shows are being cast, usually the audition is you and an engineer and a director, but decisions that are being made about who's doing what are not based on you walking into the room and anybody having a preconceived notion visually about you. They want nothing more than to hear the right voice for what they're working on.
One big company, which we all know, where they cast you according to how you look for the parts, for the major parts.
If they were doing the animated version, not live action, but animated version of G.I. Joe today as a motion picture, what star would play your role? Because they wouldn't pick us, would they?
No.
Well, the bottom line is that they probably would say, well, we want stars to push it, and that isn't what would make it successful. But what you think about, what star would play your role? Obviously, the star is not going to play 5 different roles. Yeah, Brad Pitt. I mean, so much like you. For a minute, I thought I was going to say, where's Angelina?
Come on, dollface. I know a little cafe in port where the spaghetti is great and the lights are dim. Let's you and I get together.
Let's not! And pretend we did, okay?
Leader Joe, to carry your flag.
Carry your flag to Leader Joe.
Permission to land.
Landing pad clear, Leader Joe.
I have to agree with like Julie Kavner, who will not perform her Marge Simpson character on camera.
Right.
And I have seen wonderful character voices performed on camera. Right. And it's different when you're working with the people because you're sort of all in that fantasy space anyhow. But when you see it on a TV screen, you know, it does shatter the magic.
Right. It does.
And you
Absolutely.
try not to let it affect you.
Well, they're showing a thing for Hulu now with the Family Guy guy.
Yeah, Seth.
Seth.
Yeah.
Walking through doing
He does
his
all
voices.
he does 7 of those characters.
Yeah, and it's like, is that really the guy that does the voices? And it blows it for me.
You know, but frankly, I don't like to watch people when they're producing voices for cartoons because we do weird stuff with our faces
I tend
sometimes.
to close my eyes.
You know, yeah, it's not really attractive. It's what we have to do.
Do something
in
now.
order to. Okay, I will. I'll give you an example. Okay. One time I had to play a giant, and all the guys in the room had big, deep voices. Seriously, and I went, "How the hell am I going to be a giant? What am I going to do?" Really? I mean, if I was a giant next to you. So you know what I did? Is I made it sound like I had flesh dripping off my face. So I talked like that. And so that way it sounded like I was big and heavy.
It does. It sounds like Arthur Burkhart.
Unintelligible. Was that what you were trying to say? But you know what I'm saying? You have to do weird
There's
stuff.
body language.
You know, I mean, somebody used to do a joke and say, here's a guy saying a line on television and go, "I want you to get out of here and I want you out of here now." Here's the voice actor doing it. "I want you out of here and I want you out of here now." You know, you have to do all kinds of stuff physically to bring it in.
To make it work.
Use the eyebrows, so you can hear the eyebrows.
You know, the Gary Owens can't talk unless he has his hand up.
His
here.
hand to his ear, yes.
Now, how about some audience participation?
As far as the people, the fans of G.I. Joe.
Prisoners?
No,
yes.
sorry. I remember when we went out to, I think it was Raleigh, North Carolina, with John Stevenson. And they had a whole lot. The fans went around the corner. We were signing autographs like crazy. And I remember and all the fans were just so excited. They knew exactly, "Do you remember when you said this line?" And I said, "No, I really don't." And whatever happened with Zaymont and Tomax, when you guys talked, I said, "No, I don't remember. I'm sorry, I suffer from Leinheimer's. I really can't remember all those characters." But one guy came over, big strapping guy, said, "I just want to thank you." And I said, "For what?" He said, "Because of you, I went in the Marines."
Wow.
Wow.
And I said, "Stop. What do you mean because of me?" "Well, Duke, because Duke was," and he went into this whole big thing. Big guy, 600 tattoos up and down his arm. Wow. "Because of you," I said, "You didn't kill anybody in my name, did you?" "I don't know, I may have, but I just want to thank you because you gave me that grit." And then the guy behind him said, I'm his brother-in-law. He said, "I became a cop because of you."
Wow.
And I said,
Wow.
"Whoa, I'm not sure." A serial killer
You
came
never
over.
know the ripple effect.
I became a serial killer because of you.
I've had several people say they went AWOL because of you.
Other side of the fence is I've had many people who had debilitating illnesses growing up, and that was the highlight of their day, was this block of shows and adventure and fantasy and just out, and they personalized with it and they took whatever side they took, but they lived for it, and
they still do.
They still do. And the longevity of these shows, you know, I don't think you can look for the magic. I think you just have to accept that there was magic in it for the people that there was magic in it for.
I think you will find with just about anybody who has achieved something remarkable in the sciences and industry of a certain age, that surprisingly, these cartoons, television cartoons or film cartoons, one little strange line that a voice actor has delivered has sparked them and propelled them to pursue whatever their passion was in life.
Yes, I was already reading when I was a child, and I understood things like irony, you know, as a child, but Rocky and Bullwinkle completed that. Gerald McBoing. Like you all, I'm a boomer. I remember that too, you know. And I think that we have had a positive effect on these kids coming up behind us here.
Here's something
watching.
that happens.
I think we have.
Here's something that happens to every once in a while. You meet a suit, you know, if they wear suits and ties, they're very important. You can tell because they wear suits and ties, and they're talking to you about whatever it is. And what do you do for a living? Well, I do voiceovers. Oh, really? Like what? And I said, well, when you were a kid, did you watch G.I. Joe? Well, yes, I did. Well, I was wetsuit. You were wetsuit? Yeah. And the whole thing changes, you know, because now they become 10. Yep. And it's like, wow, you were wetsuit. I grew up with you.
It's funny.
It's sweet.
So
you know?
we're having fun doing silly voices, but you never know. You could.
And I think it was a really good idea that they put women in it because you didn't traditionally see women in an all-male war type group. And I used to get letters from little girls, and would you sign? I still get things people send me because it wasn't just Barbie. I mean, she was beautiful with the hair and the perfect body and everything.
When she was regular on the show, and then suddenly there was a period of time when she wasn't appearing for a period of time, and she said, my lines are suddenly getting less and less. And I said, your action figure didn't sell.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was on life support for a while.
I actually, oh, sorry.
No, but I think it was a good example for little girls because they had the Barbie, which didn't do anything but like look for a big house in Malibu.
And a guy.
And a guy, Ken. Right. And this girl was, you know, as good as the guys were, and she was strong, and she didn't, you know, you didn't pick up her gun for her. She went out there and did what everybody else did. And so that was a good example for girls.
So people have written me a great deal, you know, mainly young white men, about Destro. This is his favorite character, as their favorite character. And, you know, would you record something for me? You have reached Andrew's private line. You know, and I find that to be a lot of fun sometimes, you know, but evil has consequences. And this was what troubled me when we were doing it. And Chris Latta Collins and I had talks about this all the time. You know, I mean, people are fighting real wars. We're involved in a two-front war. And these were terrorists. Make no mistake about it. You know, we were in this for the imagery, and, you know, I love war toys and war games and since a kid. But they're, again, you know, real wars with real heavy technology. You know, I mean, we have nukes that'll take out half the world. And I just had as long as the Joes won, as long as the Joes won.
But they always won.
Yeah, well, of course, it's
good over evil.
But you can't have drama without conflict, and you can't have conflict without a villain. And people are fascinated by evil. Yes. They're fascinated by Tony Soprano. They're fascinated by Richard III, an absolutely repellent character. Yes. And yet, when I saw Olivier portray him, I was transfixed. I loved him. Absolutely. And yet, he was a horrible, vicious human being.
I have the doll. The action figure.
Hannibal Lecter.
I have that action figure.
Fascinated by that character.
I think that, let me just add one thing and then I'll shut up. I think that what happened was that we put into the universe enough of what we were doing as evil figures to be repellent and repugnant by most people who watched it, you know. Destro and his evil machinations, you know, evil not only has consequences, but you can recognize it more, you know, in the things that they do. That's all. And you're right. I think that these kids were fascinated by it, but I don't think that anybody really wanted to emulate him in life.
I would take it to the positive side of the same conversation, but yes, it's always true that power is seductive, or that look at power is seductive. But by the same token, when you've got that battle of clear good against clearly drawn evil, an audience or a participant or anyone begins to think about what you're willing to fight for and what you're willing to fight against. Right. Everybody needs to know that. Right. I played Spirit. Spirit says, possibility and impossibility are states of mind. In my mind, there is only the possible, that which can be done. So that's another dynamic with Storm Shadow Spirit. I think all of them were probably, I mean, I don't know from a writer's standpoint, but constructed to make clear-cut conflicts. Yes. And then
Greg, I got to ask you a question. Greg, wait a second. I can't remember what I had for breakfast. You remembered your lines from the show. I don't get this.
You did homework.
This is why. This humor, this fun, this work that we do, this is why I enjoyed myself so much doing this. This is
We had a ball.
We all had a great time. It was absolutely great.
And that's what makes long hours and arduous hours into time that passes.
You used to say, no heavy lifting.
One of the other aspects of voice actors that...
Jack, stop that. Jack, stop it. You are an actor. Period.
What did I say?
You're a great actor too, as a matter of
What
fact.
did I say that
You
I-
said you're
did
a
I say
voice
I
actor. We are actors. This is what we do. And this is an ensemble. And this is why it made it. We're an acting ensemble who were wielded together by the producers and by Wally Burr, and we put it together. We did it.
It was happy chemistry.
Happy
It was good
chemistry.
chemistry. Absolutely.
We are actors, first and foremost. We found the parameters of character and we played it to the hilt. Because I think the G.I. Joe was the cutting edge of cartoon making now, today. Can you imagine if we were doing this now? Got that? If we were doing this now, these actors doing this now? Whew. It's unbelievable.
You don't have to be
you
old
know?
generals.
It would be geriatric
The
Joe.
literacy, you know, and the,
Where are they
the
now?
possibilities. Yet we are alive and kicking.
I thought you were going to shut up after you made that speech earlier.
I should. Well, now that you've got me here.